Hi everyone, just giving it a couple of minutes to just let some people arrive. We'll get cracking. So welcome to Product Love. So this is the first actually of a new series of events that I thought specifically aimed at digital product people. So it's really for anyone that's working in the product industry or part of the product community, or anyone that's got an interest in general product principles. We're going to have talks from people within Code, other local experts and people in the community as well. We're hoping really to kind of engage the wider product community and it become an ongoing event that we'll push on with throughout 2021. Aimed at anyone that wants to come and learn more and improve their craft. We're starting off. If I can just flick back to the pres, I'll talk a bit about how we're going to start off. So Code do run a series of training events called Product Fundamentals. So I thought what we could do is we could start by stepping through some of the content that we deliver as part of that. So it's really aimed at either foundation practitioners or people that are just wanting to know a bit more about how some leading product businesses operate, and it gives a kind of a good grounding to some of those principles. So we're going to start with today. As part of the series, looking at product management. A little bit about me. So I've been in the industry for 20+ years, and I've done all sorts of roles in that time. I was the founder of Code back in 1999, and throughout that time, I've been lucky enough to work with a lot of amazing businesses and organizations, and I've done quite a variety of stuff, and I've kind of worked on building digital products before they're even known as digital products, and I've seen kind of the rise of all sorts of things like great agile and lean movements and all sorts, and the rise of things like UX and mobile either. So I'm in a good position to be able to have seen that change and been instrumental in some of that for Code and some of our clients and partners that we operate with. Other interesting fact about me, I'm also the Guinness World Record holder for the largest collection of Transformers memorabilia. So if you can dig out a 2020 copy, you'll find me on page 72. There we go. Cool. So I'm going to get back to today's then focusing on product management. Let's say the purpose of the series, I'll just give a quick overview of the series that we're going to cover as part of Product Love. It's just some of those underlying principles and practices that are used kind of day to day. It's across the full product delivery cycle too. So the themes that's going to cover. So today's more around product direction and leadership. So broad product management. We're going to do a session on sort of design thinking. So more about the problem space, identifying business customer need. The design doing space is then more about kind of the solution and practice around UX, design, testing, etc. And then modern engineering, which is actually our next talk by our technical director, Dave Heath, is all about the practice to kind of build adaptable, scalable products. And then we've got a section on measurement and optimization, and finally around lean delivery, so more specifically around kind of some of the day-to-day delivery practices. So I'll kick off then and we'll get going on product management. So the things we'll cover with this, the importance really of long-term thinking. It's the thing that's often overlooked, and actually how we can make sure that we're building or starting off with that kind of that longer term aspiration in mind. Super important how we can make sure the stuff that we're doing on the ground and the teams that are building our stuff really aligns to our business goals, and that's critical. Part of that is making sure we're working on the right things, how we're prioritizing the things that we're gonna do first and do next. And then hopefully what I'm going to do as well, the way we're going to deliver this is actually just to focus on a few very, very specific methods actually. So the stuff that you can hopefully just look at later and pick up and start using within your teams and organizations. So just a little before we get into it, just to set the scene, why is kind of product management, why is it such a big thing now actually, and how has that kind of come about? I think quite simply put, it's just because probably what you're all feeling now, the things that we're building and doing today is just much more complicated than it ever has been. customer behavior is changing constantly. There's been, you know, in my career, there's been so many major disruptions to kind of how people engage with technology and expectations of technology, which has influenced their behavior. Businesses are constantly wanting to grow, so the technology has got to constantly be able to kind of adapt and scale as business direction or business needs changes, and even things that were the latest technology 2 years ago. Sometimes we might struggle to find a modern developer that wants to work on that today. So there's constant challenges there. So we're going through this kind of constant evolution, really, and all that is really against the backdrop of constant business growth, and all businesses are in the business of growth and need to get the return on the investment from their digital products. So you can see the challenge today is kind of is almost impossible. So various methods and techniques and approaches have evolved that kind of make this possible. There's also the thing that I see quite a lot as well. There's really in boiling it down to its most basics, there's two types of work that a team will do, and quite often what we see a polarization around the short term, like the running the business, the current sort of revenue and profitability and targets seem to drive quite often the work that a team does, and that's justifiable. But what that often happens is at the expense of kind of the longer term thinking. And actually, if the businesses aren't thinking about how they can be changing and adapting and evolving and growing their business for the future, then actually we get into kind of this diminishing return of optimization and this, as I say, this polarization on short term thinking that is just boiling up problems for the future. And we'll come back to this later, and it becomes particularly relevant when we talk about some of the engineering approach as well. So what I'm going to focus on then is, I'm not going to cover everything, it's super broad, but I wanted to just boil it down to a few kind of key techniques and sort of methods or approaches that I strongly recommend that you should be using. And really what they do is that it's like the join from your company, be it vision, goals or mission, right through down to the kind of the tactical delivery of what the teams are doing day to day, what they're doing and why they're doing it and how they're prioritizing it. And it's kind of some of the steps to kind of arrive at that, to make sure that we're aligned and we're doing the right thing. And so I'm just going to focus on each of those briefly. So I'll start off with the product vision. And the first thing that is often asked is, how important is a product vision? Do we really need to invest time in defining kind of the vision for a product? It's pretty clear. We're shipping, we're selling TVs, or we're offering an online subscription service, or whatever that is. Actually, what's the benefit of a product vision? There's a couple of, I think, super relevant books, or particularly like the authors who are super interesting fellas, like Simon Sinek. I don't know if you've ever seen any of his TED Talks. He's written many good books on the concept of, actually one of his key concepts is the golden circle, which is I think really important in this context. And the other fella is Dan Pink, who talks a lot about motivation. And that's kind of one of the big underlying drivers. If you think from a customer point of view, what motivates customers to buy? And the point that Simon Sinek makes in his book is actually it's quite often the inverse of kind of what you think. Customers who engage and connect at a deeper emotional level with kind of why your company exists, or what greater purpose your company can serve, then actually there's an almost unquantifiable deeper emotional connection and likelihood to buy or to connect or to somehow be involved with that business. And that carries on down to, if we think about the people within our teams that are building the products and running the business, then Dan Pink talks about the modern workforce and what how they're motivated today, and he talks specifically about autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And purpose is something that I've seen in my career. I've definitely seen in recent years as kind of has really grown. And the thing that really drives kind of people to want to work at a place is actually how they can contribute towards the bigger picture. So from different perspectives, the why and the vision is super important. So the product vision, well, it will also give us like alignment and direction for our team. Another important thing is actually when the team are really clear about where we're going and what we want to do, that cohesion brings speed as well. It's also a valuable tool to help our decision making, as always happens throughout the life cycle of a product. There'll be questions will be asked, things will be thrown into the mix, and if we can kind of use the vision as to help support some of our decision making and prioritization. And then things we talked about, massively important, is motivation for our team. So the team want to be proud of the thing that they're building and working towards. And also product vision needs to kind of show, it kind of helps make sure that we are thinking about the future and that we do have in mind what we think the future needs will be of our industry, of our customer base. And it can help us think about how we can change our business as well. So it serves at a few levels. But the great thing about kind of sort of vision setting is they don't need to be, we're not talking about massive drawn out processes actually. And with a lot of product techniques, there are quite lean ways, I would say, of being able to arrive at something that people can kind of get behind, and teams can feel kind of motivated and feel they've got kind of some structure and direction. One of the really well used ones is the product vision statement. So literally in a sentence, teams can get together, and this works quite well to be done collaboratively. People can think from different perspectives about their audiences, what that audience needs, specifically what their product should be or the category it operates in. What's the benefit? What's the thing that it's going to deliver for that audience? How does it differentiate from the competition? And what is kind of some of the key points of difference, or kind of the USPs that it would have? And so, as you can see, in what is quite a short statement, but really works well in a kind of a workshop type environment with different stakeholders, with different opinions, you can kind of arrive at something that can just help state kind of where we want to be and kind of how we want to operate. And there's a nice example which is probably really old now. It's one of Amazon's. So I'll just read it out for World Wide Web users who enjoy books. Amazon is a real retail bookseller that provides instant access to over 1.1 million books, which probably back then seemed a lot. Unlike a traditional book retailer, Amazon provides a combination of extraordinary convenience, low prices, and comprehensive selection. So it's probably changed massively. I think Amazon have been through various product visioning exercises, but it's interesting to see probably one of its very earliest ones how that played out. And there's other real nice simple methods as well. Some of these are a little bit more tactile, like the product vision box. You may have heard it known as like the cereal box or the soap box exercise. Is great when we are able to do these things collaboratively in a real physical environment. It's a good kind of creative exercise for getting the team to think again about what's special about the product, or what could the product offer, how it could be different, and just go through a bit of a creative exercise to arrive at that. But what's probably more important is that these things stimulate kind of conversations, and when the teams, and having multiple teams create these within the one session, actually it's the conversations that then stem from that gets the team thinking about what's really important, and thinking about actually how far they could be pushing themselves as well. And then another exercise, very similar. This one is particularly about thinking about the future, the newspaper headline. So it's almost like thinking about again what would be like a front page of a magazine or a newspaper or whatever, that's kind of reporting a future day on the success of the product. And so again, gets you thinking about, and sometimes that imagining kind of helps thinking about a state in the future, helps stretch your thinking, and helps think about actually what have we achieved, what are the success, what's the change in the world that we've managed to kind of bring about. And again, these things are great to kind of stimulate in discussions and conversations to then kind of arrive at something that the team are all then really behind. So what do we need to make a good product vision? And sometimes, some of these, I suppose, we don't want this to be a tick, kind of a box ticking exercise. The team, I think, by working collaboratively as a team to create these, you get kind of buy-in from all members in the team, and I think by making sure that we stretch our thinking as we do these, hopefully we aim or we end up with something that gives us, gives us something that is going to kind of inspire and motivate our teams. So when we think about what it's got to be, well, it's got to be grounded in reality. It's got to be based on real customer needs and motives, really. So it does need to be customer centric. It's got to really describe kind of that change that we want as well. So if you think about our customer, what's the end outcome for the customers or also for the business as well? What's the big change you want to go for? And that big change has got to kind of be, that's kind of where the excitement and inspiration comes from, and that's got to be something that the team can relate to and kind of want to do. I'm actually watching, I'm going back watching Silicon Valley, and if anyone's ever seen that comedy series, and it's got me in stitches at the moment, because constantly all the I suppose they're playing on the cliche that the vision for all the tech businesses is to change the world, and whereas it's kind of become a bit of a cliche, there's kind of some truth. And the best example I ever heard of where you should aim for a vision statement is, well, think about how you can kind of change the world, and then just go at 1 or 2 notches down from there, because that should mean, one, it's pretty straightforward and you're not coming up with something that's unrealistic. And it's something that the team can relate to and feel that they can have a part in achieving as well. It needs to be kind of achievable as well. Cool. If I move on then to product canvas, so canvases have become quite popular in recent years. I think I saw a link not too long ago of there's a website that has 100 different type forms of canvas. And so canvases are probably, they've been maybe for a while now the kind of the in vogue thing to create. But to be honest, it's for good reason. And even though there might be in some instances being a bit overused, I think for the reasons that they have come about, I think they're absolutely still valid. In a digital product sort of capacity, the canvas is really it's kind of the artifact that is summarizing the product strategy. And when we think about why we might create a product canvas, it's just so that we can, in a succinct way, describe what is our overall product strategy. And so all the information that we've got can be kind of in one place and can be summarized, and it's accessible to the team and to any stakeholders, and it just kind of gives super clarity about how we're going to go about succeeding with our product. And the super important thing is it's just easy to understand and to get and to reference. And the ideal is that these product canvases, they're kind of part of the fixtures and fittings sort of visually in our team spaces, so the team can reference them constantly. I suppose in my experience, the product canvas is a bit of an antidote to the thing that I used to do myself 20 years ago. We used to start any big development really with what would be quite a lengthy product strategy phase, which was absolutely valid, but the product strategy would typically end up in a document or a PowerPoint that would be huge, and then would often just be used as a kind of a gated sign-off point to then begin the actual design and development. And quite often the actual design and development process would sometimes be divorced from kind of some of that strategy, or it'd be tricky to make sure that the strategy was finding its way constantly into that development. So the product canvas is a way to make sure that actually that strategy is front of mind for the team. So we think about what would go into one of these. So it's the usual stuff. It's the things that, from a business point of view, what is kind of driving this? What's either the business vision or the business drivers? What do we define as success from a customer and kind of market point of view? Actually, who are we targeting? What do we know about them? How do we think we're going to succeed kind of with a new audience? Who are the team that are working on it? And then what are the current challenges that we know that we need to overcome? And what's some of the technology that we're going to implement as well? So if you look up product canvas, there's lots of different examples of kind of canvases online. And as I say, they do stretch from things like the lean canvas to the business model canvas to various different forms of canvas. I think the product canvas itself was probably made popular by Roman Pichler, if anyone's familiar with him, who's I think a strategist that came up with the product vision board and the product canvas board. But some of the things that we make sure we include, kind of some of our base template, is absolutely things like the business drivers, understanding who the team and the stakeholders are, having that clarity of vision and the customer proposition as well for what we're going to build, and then having that clear USP, or we may talk about what's our unfair advantage in the market. And then it's important to be clear on kind of what we think success is going to look like for the thing that we're building. I'll talk a bit about later how we join some of that up. And then going down to, just our audience, what do we know about them? What are some of their top needs or problems? What is the thing that we're going to do going to address with that? And then who else is doing this? Who's our competition? What do we need to know? So they're kind of some of the key things, which again, they're nothing new at all. That they form any part of, typical part of any kind of strategic kind of process. But I think what's important is that these can be summarized and articulated on a kind of what may be a large one page, with some other things around the side that might be relevant to kind of your team at the stage that you're at as well. So I've talked about, in those what seems like a previous lifetime when teams used to be located in physical offices. It was always great to kind of have the physical canvas together and to physically co-create this canvas as well with the team. Different stakeholders could actually bring some of their research or their understanding, their insights and their knowledge to these sessions, and we could kind of co-create this product canvas, and then the canvas would then live within the team space. But what's great though, that working to build that together is again a relatively short workshop, as long as people are bringing the elements to it. But then that shortness of space means actually we're just really focused on the most important things, and these are the things that the team will then remember and take into some of their constant working patterns. Next thing, I'm going to talk a little about OKRs. I won't go into a lot of detail. I'm just going to do a bit of a summary. But why are OKRs? Why are they important? And for me, OKRs they're kind of like the glue, I think, that we make sure we kind of joins what the business needs to how a product team is prioritizing actually what it's going to build. And what we can't do is to divorce kind of the vision of the product for those day-to-day needs of the business. And so the OKRs is a nice way actually that the business can give a team some direction and prioritization, but yet let them have autonomy within that. So super quick history of OKRs. They seem to become popular in the last couple of years or so, probably since John Doerr's book Measure What Matters. And lots of big companies have been adopting them. I think everyone seems to think they originated from Google. They kind of did, only by the nature of that's where John Doerr had worked. But they actually stem back. What's interesting is stem back to the 60s actually. I think it maybe have been Intel perhaps, or I forget where it was now, that Andy Grove worked at first. And then that's where he met with John Doerr, and they've probably had a slow ramping up, but then seems to have kind of taken off in the last 2 or 3 years, where so many businesses are using them now. And the reason for that is because it's actually I suppose they've formalized slightly more what has been something that all businesses do in setting objectives, but they've just given it a bit of an easy to digest format. So why would you use them? Well, they can align what your team does to the company and the company's objectives and goals. And when we talk about kind of the cycles that they operate in, they can help you think about kind of shorter bursts and help you prioritize what you would do. They are very much about emphasizing kind of the result or the outcome that we want to achieve, and they are quantitative in that way, but they're just kind of super straightforward. Everyone can kind of get them once they're explained. And then what they do is actually they help, if we're briefing the team via kind of OKRs, the team is then empowered really and accountable to be delivering against those OKRs. So in terms of making sure our team has got an alignment back to the business and the message of, the business need is passed through them, then the team have the parameters that they need. As it always happens with these types of things, as soon as you try and describe in detail actually how OKRs work, it makes them sound more complex than they are. But an OKR is a combination of an objective and a key result. So the objective is the higher level thing or description of what we want to achieve, and so the input to that might be something given by the business of maybe a big milestone that is needed for the business, or maybe part of how we're going to achieve and deliver against that product vision. And the idea is actually that we have a small number of concurrent objectives, because as with all these things, as we start to add more of these, it just starts to kind of dilute our attention and fragment our time. And then the way that we know we've achieved an objective is through the key result. And so you can have any number of key results really against an objective, but the thing is the key result just describes in really basic terms actually how we'll know that we've delivered that objective. And it's really important that these are measurable, because actually as we get into kind of some of our cycles, we want to be demonstrating that we're progressing against these, and we need to be able to measure how we are doing. And then if you get into the detail about them, it's often described that we should always have a factor of stretch within our KRs. And so if we hit 70% of the target that we set, that would be acknowledged as being a success. The KRs again usually are time bound, because that helps give us kind of focus. And and ideally if we're thinking about kind of the end result and it's something that we can measure, then that makes it part of kind of our day-to-day operation, which means it's kind of embedding into kind of how the team are thinking and working. And so you can see those key results are then the join basically to execution, to what we're actually going to deliver and build. We'll also almost when we start to think about kind of our roadmaps and our themes, epics, user stories, etc. There will be specifically about how we can deliver one of these key results that we've defined. The great thing about OKRs as well, and probably why they've become so popular, is that they really should cascade right down through the whole organization. So as typically happens in kind of annual cycles, the company would kind of set some broad OKRs for the year. So what are some of the big goals for the year? What are some of those main objectives or main milestones that actually we want to hit within the year? They then get passed down at a team level, and the team will then, either working with senior stakeholders, agree kind of how their team can deliver deliver some part of that OKR. So typically it might be what is the key result at a company level that the team can influence. And then what's the nice thing as well, these then can even cascade down to individuals, and say myself as a product owner, product manager, or UX designer, for example. What are some of my own objectives that I can work on, which will ladder up to the objectives of my team, which then also ladder up to the objectives of the company. So you get this beautiful alignment right down to the business, or right down from the top to the bottom of the business, of everybody working towards the same end goals ultimately. And when we talk about OKRs, so they usually ran at so annually at a company level, and that's probably quite typical to how most businesses operate anyway. They'll kind of set these every year, and kind of to give kind of some direction to the workforce. But then they're best being broken down, and we'll talk about when we talk about roadmaps in a minute actually. So the quarterly cycle seems to be have emerged as the best kind of cycles really, to give teams enough time to be able to work through some substantial change, yet it's frequent enough for them to be focused and be able to kind of adapt and pivot. We'll talk a bit about that. But then an ideal, and lots of businesses that I've worked with do track weekly. Some track, I know some that track kind of their results daily and hourly even. But typically, actually, if we're going to react to kind of some of those results, and that might affect kind of the behaviour and kind of the focus of our team, then weekly or fortnightly are usually kind of good cycles, as well as part of any of our other sort of ways of working and routines, which we can talk about at one of the different sessions around delivery. So quick recap on those then. So OKRs, they absolutely align some of our product goals, the goals of the business. We make sure we've got that cascade throughout. And they are, they are smart in that they are specific and measurable, etc. And so it does give us, it gives us some very specific targets, so that clarity on kind of what we're working towards. And quite often they are set quarterly, and we suggest quarterly, and that also usually aligns to kind of other business routines that are going on as well, just meaning we're kind of, again, in sync. But they are, once they're defined, they're kind of owned by the team, and because they're so simple, really, it should mean the team's quite focused. If the team's priority is to deliver against an OKR, then actually that means that they know the job to be done and should be able to kind of adapt and do what they need to hit those targets. And as I said at the beginning, it's that nice join between kind of the vision and some of the strategy, and actually how we get that into kind of what the team are actually going to be designing and building. Which kind of leads us on to the last thing I'm going to talk about is product roadmaps then. So how are we going to get these now into something that we're going to be briefing the team on then building and stuff that are actually going to create? The first thing to say about kind of roadmaps is they're often confused, I suppose, with a plan, and I'm not sure where this quote came from, but I'm using it all the time now. So then if anyone, please message me if you know kind of the origins of this. But yeah, the purpose of a plan isn't to follow it, but it's to give alignment and momentum. And I think that's really true, and even more true today, because I think quite often roadmaps are incorrectly used. But when we think what we want from a roadmap, it really is to demonstrate the product direction and the delivery intent. And intent is the important word then. And that is to make sure we've got all stakeholders aligned, from our team down to kind of our senior leadership team, that they're clear on what it is that we're going to do over a period of time, and they're also kind of clear on the priorities as well. And what a roadmap should do is help to visualize just the priorities in which we're going to achieve it, and how we're going to work against those kind of OKRs. So it starts to become a visualization, really, on actually perhaps how we're going to deliver against some objectives and OKRs and product vision. So what it really isn't, though, it isn't a release or a project plan, and quite often, maybe because there's confusion between the roles of each of these, or whether it's a historic need of the business to kind of know very, very specific dates. Roadmaps have been, they've been confused, I think, with detailed Gantt charts and promises and commitments around delivery dates, and there becomes like a false tying of a roadmap and dates to with dates that starts to form kind of really what is a false commitment. And the thing I'll say, in all my years of working, we'll talk about some of the time later, but and I'm not dismissing actually time at all. I think it's really, really important, but I don't think I've ever seen a roadmap that's been created at the start of a year that has actually been delivered in to the timescales that was originally perceived. And if it did, I would probably argue that there was something fundamentally wrong, that actually we're not learning, we're not adapting, and the business itself isn't being responsive to the change that naturally happens. That is, unless you're in a very specific niche business that doesn't change ever, but that's rarely the case these days. So what do we want to move from? So the thing that people are probably more familiar with and comfortable with are time-based roadmaps. And that's because actually everyone likes to see, okay, this is going to happen by a certain time. I can see exactly what it is that you're going to work on, and then I can maybe start to talk about some of the features or things that we're going to have at a certain point in time. And quite often, though, what this will do is I suppose it sets a false expectation, and it sets kind of a predictability that just isn't true in reality. As opposed to the thing that's really been emerging the last few years are theme-based roadmaps, and really they are less specific, but what they are doing is they're just being honest about the reality of kind of what we know, and about what we know the way a product development is going to play out. The thing that we know is that we can be more accurate in the near term. So if we think about kind of the stuff we're going to do within the next 3 months, we've got clear focus, we've got direction, perhaps we're working towards kind of some OKRs that have got some clear goals. So we can be very, very clear, and the team, it's the thing that the team are working on at the moment, they've got all the clarity about how they're going to go about it, most likely as well. As we start to think about 6, 9 or 12 months down the line, then actually who knows if these things are still going to be on the roadmap at that point. So thinking about overarching themes and thinking about how we kind of bucket these, and starting to introduce kind of the terminology of even now, next and future, starts to get our teams thinking, okay, well, we can work on those things that we know, and we can actually we can not worry too much about stuff that's coming down the line. If we talk about themes, so what might we mean by a theme? And so again, so what we want to do is want to avoid just jumping straight to a feature. There's because the things that we want to address, again, if it's around delivering it against the business OKR, so perhaps the business wants to see an increase in sign-ups, or the business wants to see kind of penetration to a new market, then actually the things that we need to do there are kind of broader things that are going to enable that. And so that might either be reacting to like a customer problem or a customer need, or say one of those kind of objectives. And just by kind of having these conversations at that kind of higher level, it means that actually when the team start to step into kind of the discovery and design and development process, that we've actually got some flexibility to be able to adapt to do the right thing, and we're not going to be stuck with the very specific feature that the business may be at the start, at some point decided was the thing that it needed. A question that I'm asked quite a lot, though, then, and we've kind of touched on it, like, are dates a bad thing? And the answer is not at all. And I think for some businesses it'd be quite hard for businesses to totally divorce themselves from some of their other planning cycles. So what does work quite well is thinking about things in terms of quarterly buckets, and again, the same principles apply in kind of the current quarter or the next quarter. We can be kind of more accurate, really, about what we think we're going to deliver, and I suppose and keep focus on that. But we've got the same benefit in that the team can have visibility on what's coming down the line, and that might affect how the team, knowing something that we're thinking about for Q3 or Q4, that might influence actually how they go about perhaps developing something in Q1. So it's good to kind of have that visibility. And also, the truth is, there are sometimes key milestones. There are certain business must-dos, and the team needs to be aware of those. And that also needs to help shape the work that the team would do if they are absolute business imperatives. So we find things like the quarterly buckets is a good kind of compromise, and we get the same benefit from the team. They then have the added benefit as well. So I think some of the best roadmaps I've seen is where we really do align them to our OKRs. So if you think about, we take some of our objectives and actually some of the themes that we're going to deliver. So these kind of functional sort of delivery themes are specifically aligned to the objectives that we've got for that year or for the quarter. And so actually what we've got is we've got real alignment there, and we've got key moments in time where we are measuring the success of those, and we are kind of either resetting some of our themes, or we're refreshing our kind of roadmaps, which is something that needs to be done constantly, but always with a view of actually what's the next business priority and how have we done in the previous quarter. And so this is kind of best practice for me to really get into. But I do really advocate that roadmaps can be kind of quite basic. When we think of the roadmap isn't, as we said, it's not the delivery, it's not the detailed delivery plan. The role of the roadmap is so that actually we've got kind of we can visualize some of the priorities that we've got, and we can kind of demonstrate and align people on what we think is most important. And if I take it, a good example like Monzo, who are really transparent about theirs, and it's actually published through an online Trello board, so anyone can see, but you can see how they use similar terminology. They're now next and future, they're called the near term, medium term and long term. And again, they're just at a relatively high level, a kind of a feature theme kind of level, really, that they're looking to address. But again, for anyone looking at that, it's easy to digest and super clear about what they're going to do, which illustrates what's important to them and when they're going to look at it. Cool. So just to kind of summarize how we get from kind of the vision, be it kind of the company, informing our product vision. We then flesh that out through kind of some of our strategies around the customer, the market and the business drivers. That then we work kind of in conjunction with kind of the OKRs that give us that kind of annual and quarterly focus on the business goals as well. And all those things kind of find their way into kind of our roadmaps that are easy to create, easy to understand, and really practical and useful for the team, and don't hamstring the team. Cool. And there's a bit of suggested reading as well. There's a couple of great books. I think Radical Focus is a more new book that talks about kind of OKRs and goes into a bit more detail, just building on the John Doerr book. But some other really useful things that probably take it a step further. There's a really good book on impact mapping, so how you arrive at deriving scope from kind of business goals as well. And similar, user story mapping is something that I do cover usually in some of the product fundamentals training. There's a great book there by Jeff Patton who coined the phrase. Cool. So I think we've got a few minutes. Are there any questions at all? Let's see. Yain, are you around with any? Just put myself live. Just waiting to see if there was any questions that were flagged. There's been one. Oh, actually, there's a few questions. Here we go. So, who usually sets the OKRs in your organisation? So, well, they're typically set at for us, I suppose we work slightly differently to how we'd be, because we usually work with our partners, but they would usually be set by a leadership team or often at the company level by the C-suite, and then they're more at a team level. They would be set with either kind of the product manager or whoever would kind of lead or own a part of the product, and they would usually work in conjunction really just to get them approved with a wider stakeholder group, just to make sure that they've got that kind of that alignment. There's another question: how far in the future do you think roadmaps should look? Yeah, that's always a good question. So typically I think what generally works well is probably a period of about 12 months. Some businesses, and again, it depends on what it is that we're building, and it depends on that that kind of that fuzziness of the future as well. Because if we're thinking the stuff that's far out, then we don't need to have kind of much detail of them. Then actually what we've got is we've really, again, it's just an intent of things that we think at some point we're going to do. The reason I think 12 months is plenty enough, because I think it does align to usual company cycles, and quite often companies will start the year with an aspiration of the next 12 months and kind of what they want to achieve, and I think that's absolutely valid. But the truth is we know we're going to be, we're going to adapt what we do based on what happens with our customers, what happens with the performance of our products, and so we do need to change and iterate. And so going too far out just becomes a bit of a waste of time. But you can see, to the detail that we're kind of talking about, if what we're really just doing is articulating kind of some of our priorities and the things that we think are important, then we're not really spending too much time going into kind of crazy project plans and Gantt charts and things like that. I've got a few minutes, see if we can grab a couple more questions. Can you explain OKRs in detail a little more, please? Well, we probably won't have the time for that. But hopefully I kind of covered it. Like the OKRs is really just a framework for companies setting objectives, really, and hopefully that came across. And I don't know any company that doesn't set objectives for their team or for their products, because usually every business will want to kind of set some clarity of what it expects, be they the results that they would expect to achieve. Yeah, so the OKR is just a simple format that just has the objective statement that is just backed up by some subpoints that reference the key results by which they know that they've achieved that objective. So it's quite simple in that point of view, but it's more about how they're kind of reset quarterly, how teams check into them, be they weekly, or how they form kind of those objectives form the team's measures that they do check into as part of their regular team rituals. And then there's one last one. Are there any best practices to translate product OKRs to internal org level or individual level OKRs? Yeah, so typically what's suggested there is that you would take the key results part. So let's say at a company level, the company might say, actually, an objective for the year is that we want to we want to sell a new product type, and we know that we've got success where we've sold perhaps, I don't know, 100,000 products or whatever that might be. And so some of the key results beyond that, beneath that would be we have a marketing team in place, we've done X, we've done Y, and we've done Z. So typically what happens is when we talk about the cascade, you take some of the key results because they become the more tangible thing, and the team say, okay, well, my team can't influence that bit. I'm not going to create the marketing team, but our team can actually create the new product type on site, or we can have built the CRM, or we could have done whatever. And so that would kind of form part of some of the team's objectives and key results, and that's how they can deliver against that company need. And then by the time you get down to the organizational level as well, the individual level, then typically as part of that, there could be some things that might be some personal goals. So you could say, perhaps actually, we're going to implement a new CRM as part of this new rollout. I don't know anything about the integration, so a personal objective for me is going to will be to learn about how we integrate with our CRM system, or I'm going to introduce some new technology, or I'm going to have worked with a team that I don't typically work with, whatever that might be. And so you can see how actually that's how we can get that kind of that connection, and actually someone can directly take some drivers for their own individual objectives for a year, which could form part of their personal growth, whilst also helping achieve some of the needs of the team and of the company as well. Cool. I think that's most questions there. One last one's a quick one. What tools do you suggest for doing these activities remotely? Yeah, I did talk about that quite a bit. So there's a couple of things that we do. Well, if you're not using them now, we use a lot of tools for running our teams. Like, we do use Trello actually, but we use a tool called LeanKit, which is kind of like Trello on steroids. Can be really configured to create all kinds of workflows and visualizations of actually work to be done, and backlogs and that type of thing as well, which is great. But then for some of the collaborative sessions that we do, we now online we use tools like Miro and Mural, and they're great. So we've pretty much replaced, whilst we're working remotely, we've replaced all those kind of face-to-face workshop types situations with those sorts of tools. Cool, probably better leave it there. We're just about 5 minutes over. So yeah, hopefully that was useful to everyone. I think just to quickly go back to, let me see if just gonna talk about what's coming up next. Yeah, hope everyone can see that. So the next stuff coming up, we've got our Code Talks series of events as well, which I think the first one might be on the 2nd of Feb, which I think is in a week's time. Just need to check. And I think we're talking about what we think is going to happen in 2021, looking at from a customer point of view and from a business point of view, the trends that we've seen from last year that we think are going to be the reality of what a lot of businesses are going to have in store for this year. So we're going to talk a bit about that from a kind of emergent trends point of view. And then we've got the second in the series, the product fundamentals series. We've got our Dave Heath, who's our technical director, and he's going to talk a bit about kind of modern engineering practices and and a bit around that. So that should be kind of a really good in-depth view at some of that too. Cool. And then if you want to sign up for any of these events, it's just the events page on the website, codecomputerlove.com/events. And if you want to catch up with any of our other shenanigans, so yeah, you can see us on Twitter and loads of other places as well. Cool. So I think that's everything. Thanks everyone. Sorry we ran over slightly. I'll look forward to if you do want to join the Code Talks event, which is, I'm pretty sure it's next Tuesday, then I'm on that as well, so I'll see you there. If not, I'll catch up with you all at some point in the future. Take care. Thanks.